This example is asking us about reference angles for various angles. Okay, so to do this, we've got to be clear, what is a reference angle? It is the positive angle distance to the nearest x-axis. So that might sound a little mysterious. Let's put it into practice. I think it'll make sense. So let's take 204 degrees. So what I would suggest is you go to the unit circle. You'll have this. I'm sending this to you. You'll have this in your notes. 204 degrees. Now that's not on our chart, but we know about where it is, right? Because if this is 210, here's the center. 240 must be, 204. I keep saying 240, don't I? 204, that'll work, I guess. All right, so about right there, we'll say that's 200 and, I even want to write 240, 204 degrees, meaning, let's be clear what that means. Here's 0, we mean from here to there is 204 degrees, right? We start at 0. So from 0 to that spot is 204 degrees. It's a little past 180, not all the way to 210. Okay, that's 204 degrees. But they're asking me for the reference angle of 204. What's the reference angle? The positive angle distance to the nearest x-axis. So in other words, it's how far to the nearest x-axis. From right here, pretend you're standing right here at 204 degrees. And you're wanting to get to the, why do my people look like they have tails? I'm so unartistic, it's sad. All right, there we go. That person doesn't really look like he has a tail. Now, so for how far from there to the nearest x-axis, because that's what a reference angle is. Reference, it means with reference to something. With reference to the nearest x-axis. To the nearest x-axis. It's how far to the nearest x-axis. Well, what do you mean nearest? Well, this is the positive x-axis on this side. This is the negative x-axis on that side. So if you're right here, this is obviously the closer x-axis than going all the way over there, right? So the nearest x-axis is going to be the negative side of the x-axis rather than the positive, at least when you're over here at 204 degrees. And the question is, it's how far, that's what I should have written, how far to the nearest x-axis. So how far from there to there, that's the reference angle. Well, it's from 180 to 204. So that's not bad. It's just 204 minus 180. I think that's 24 degrees. So there we go. There's our first answer. 24, it's already got the degree symbol there for us. Let's try 333 now. 333 degrees. So let's undo what we've got here and do 333 degrees. So 333, it's about, looks like it's just a little bit past that spot. Yeah, a little past 330, right? So, and let me put the 0 back in there. And so here's 333 degrees. And make no mistake, it means from 0 all the way to there, 333 degrees. So now the question is, what's the reference angle from here? So here you are. You're standing right there. I'm going to try to draw a better person with no tail. There we go, standing at 333 degrees. How far to the nearest x-axis? Well, which side's the nearest side, the positive or the negative? Well, if you're at 333, certainly the positive is the nearest x-axis. That's your reference angle. It's how far to the nearest x-axis, and how far is that? Well, this is 360. So 360 minus 333, right? That's going to be what, 27 degrees? That's 27 degrees is how far to the nearest x-axis. That's the reference angle from 333, 27 degrees. 27. Let's do one more. Negative 140. So now, to do negative 140, this is a negative angle. So that means I'm going to start right here and go in the negative direction instead of this way, which is positive angles, right? So I'm going to go in the negative direction. 140? I already forgot. Yeah, 140. So how you going to do that? Well, you know, I think you know, negative angles go this way. I think you know this is negative 90. Even though it's called 270, that's its positive version. This is negative 90, and all the way to here would be negative 180 because it's halfway around, right? So if negative 140 must be somewhere between those. That's good enough. I just need to know which quadrant it's in. So it's going to be somewhere around there. Good enough. It's about all I need, right? Whoop, I'm supposed to be using red, aren't I? So let me do this again. So from right here, it's going to be about like right there. So that is where negative 140 will fit about. You just have to get the right quadrant. You don't have to get it all exact. As long as you're in the correct quadrant, it'll all work out. So I know negative 140 is somewhere between I showed it right here, negative 90 and negative 180, right? You know that much. So you know it's over there in that quadrant. Okay, now make no mistake, an angle is from 0 degrees, right? So that we're saying, when we put it there, we're saying from here to there is negative 140 degrees, right? From 0 to this spot right here is negative 140 degrees. All right, but we need to find the reference angle. How do we find, let me erase all these scribbles, and that's it. Okay, how do we find a reference angle? Well, you stand at your spot, negative 140, and you say, how far to the nearest x-axis? So if you're standing right there at negative 140, how far to the near, which x-axis is nearest? Is it the positive side of the x-axis right here? Is that nearest? No, clearly not. This is the nearest. This is our reference angle, isn't it? It's right here. That's the nearest. The negative side of the x-axis is the nearest. So a reference angle is how far to the nearest x-axis. Now, hear me on this because this is an easy mistake to make. It's always a positive answer. Oops, not writing answer. Reference angles are always positive because they're a distance, right? It's how far. Think about it. If somebody said, hey, how far between here and the door? Would the answer ever be -3? Nobody talks that way, right? Distances, how far, distances are always given as positive. Right, and that's how reference angles work. They're a distance. They're always given as positive. So, it's the positive answer. It's the positive distance. So how far between 180 and negative 140? That's a little tricky. I can't just take 180 minus 140, or can I? Yeah, I can, because this is 180 and this is back 140, right? So the difference between them, 180 minus 140, that's going to be 40 degrees. This reference angle, this distance has got to be 40 degrees more, right? If you're at 140, it's 40 more to get to 180, because that negative 180 is the same as positive 180. Right? This spot is back 180. It's also forward 180. It's halfway around either way you go. So that worked. If you're standing right here, you are 40 degrees from the nearest x-axis. So that is your reference angle, and it's positive. You don't need to write a plus sign. They're all always positive. Reference angles are the positive angle distance to the nearest x-axis. That's what it always is. So you just locate where the angle is. I located the minus 140, and then you just say how far to the nearest x-axis, whether that's the negative side, in this case it's closest, and then sometimes it's the positive side. That's what a reference angle is.